si musí probrat prostě nějakou záplavu mailů od Warnera a pamatuješ si ho, tak je to blázna. Tak jako, tam ti taky ty, co by to asi mohli trošku do toho něco říkat, tak to se budou zapálcávat tímhle a pak tam ještě Struber tam něco přispívá a CDI Beyond. A nemám moc motivaci si do toho nějakou koukat.
Píšeš tam niečo tak, alebo to trochu sleduješ?
Sleduje, ty máš trošku sleduje. Já jsem to zdal. Co stalo?
29.
Jo, dík.
Okay, so let's start the last session of this day in this room. The topic is CDI Beyond Java EE. This talk, we are going to explore how CDI can be used in plain Java SE environment.
Skip this, okay.
Sorry. And integrate it with JVM toolkits as Vertex. The session is presented by Martin Kuba, who's software engineer from Red Hat.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the last talk today. My name is Martin Kuba, and I'm software engineer at Red Hat. Currently being Weld project lead. Weld is the reference implementation of CDI. So the topic is CDI, and it stands for context and dependency injection. It's not something like continuous delivery integration, whatever. So we are going to talk about components, about dependency injection, and so on. However, today we are not going to cover any CDI basics or core features. Instead, I would like to show you how easy and efficient it is to use CDI container, in our case Weld, even outside EE application servers. So, before we start, I only have a few slides. So we have some example application prepared. I recommend you to either check out the repository, the link is there, it's available at GitHub, or browse it online.
May I ask you to publish?
Yeah, sorry. I will try to. So I recommend you to either check out the repository or browse it online, because it's always better to look at the code on your laptop. And that's it. Now back to agenda. We have 4 parts today to our talk. First, we will try to introduce the Weld SE Bootstrap API, because if you're using CDI outside an application server, the basic problem is how to start and stop the CDI container so that you can use it. We will look into Weld SE Bootstrap API, which means we will not be using CDI portable API. The reason is that even old versions of Weld, old and stable versions of Weld, do implement this API, whereas the portable API, which was introduced in CDI 2.0, is too hot. Like CDI 2.0 is currently being reviewed by GCP, so it's not even released. Then I would like to show you how to make use of this API to test CDI components. When I say testing CDI components, I mean something like unit testing of CDI components, no integration testing. Afterwards, I will try you to show how CDI and Weld can cooperate with modern toolkits like Vertex. And finally, I will show you a development tool we have in Weld for developers to inspect the runtime of the application. So, as I said, the first thing we should do is to introduce the Bootstrap API. We have to start and stop the container somehow. Those green lines are the simplest possible use case. The first line starts the container, and the second line stops the container. As you can see, there are two classes, specific classes. The first one is called Weld, which is actually not the best name, but we have to remain backward compatible, and it's there for ages, so I'm going to change it. This class is a kind of reusable builder, which is used to configure and start a container instance. And then, when you call the method initialize, you receive a Weld container instance, which represents running container. So, as I said before, we're going to walk through some code. So, in the repo, there are a few tests. All those tests are regular unit tests, and we're trying to use the Bootstrap API to start a container, do some tests, and shut down it correctly. Before I start looking at the test, I will show you a very simple application I prepared for today. So, the first thing we will see is this interface. It's called hello service, and it has one default method, hello, which simply returns a hello message. Then we need some implementation of this interface, some bean, which implements this interface. In our case, it's called event hello service, and it's using the default implementation of the hello method, but also fires an event whenever a unique, whenever a new, a unique message is created, constructed. This is weird. Okay, fine. I will try to move slowly. Okay, so this is our implementation of the hello service, and we're just firing events. And then we also have two more components. The first one is called console logger. Again, it's a very simple bean which just defines an observer method. This observer method simply observes all the messages fired and logs them to the console. And the last component we have is a little bit more interesting. It's a decorator. Maybe I should ask a question. How many of you do know something about CDI actually? Yeah. Okay, not that much. Decorators are kind of interceptors or AOP components which intercept invocations of our component, but the difference is that decorators know something about the business logic of the component they intercept. In our case, our decorator implements a host service, so it means that in this method hello, we're actually intercepting the bean method invocation, and in our case, we are just filtering out forbidden words. Means that if you pass something, we have some predefined forbidden words, and if you pass a forbidden word, then we replace it. That's all. And finally, we do call delegate, which is actually the bean instance we are intercepting. Fine. Now back to the test. Let's look at the first method here. It's very simple. It's called test hello. On the first line, we are starting the container. Then we are Then we are using our container to perform a programmatic lookup. This is a standard thing in CDI. You can either do inject something, and the other approach is that you can do a more dynamic lookup of beans. So we just obtain a bean instance, and then we do some assertion that when we call hello service hello world, we receive a hello world message. And then we shut down the container. I have a comment there. Does anyone know or see an issue with this approach of stopping container? No? Well, if our assertion fails, then the container will not be shut down correctly, right? So this is not the best thing you you can do. If you look at the second method we have here, which is testing for binary, it looks a little bit better because Weld container also implements auto-closable, which means that you could use it with private resources block. So in the second case, everything is okay because once the private resources block completes, the container is automatically shut down. And then we have the last one, Tesla optimized, which is using some configuration methods here to configure the valid instance for tests. In this case, we are disabling discovery because we know that we only want to test few classes, so we don't want to Welch to perform discovery of bin archives and so on. So I can run the test, but we will not see that much, except that some messages are really here. Oops. What should I do? Yeah, you're back. Okay, now back to the second topic. It's testing CDI components. In fact, you can test CDI components as normal classes, but usually CDI components or CDI beans make use of some services provided by the container, like dependency injection, events, interceptors, so on. So here is where we usually use mocking frameworks, but mocks for CDI components might get pretty complex, and sometimes it's even impossible to write a mock, for example, for decorators. So this approach I'm talking about is a little bit different. We start a CDI container with minimal configuration, and the benefits are that container provided services are available. It's very fast and lightweight, and might be also combined with mocking frameworks. I'm going to show another example. In this case, I'm going to show a test for our decorator. As I said before, the decorator should just intercept the invocation, and if the name passed is forbidden, it should replace it. If you look at the test, we don't use the Weld SE Bootstrap API directly here. We're using JUnit test rule. This is a special test rule we provided in Weld. And what it does is that it starts and stops the container test method execution. The advantage of this approach is that it's really, the configuration of the test is really minimal. So in this case, I'm telling Weld to only scan those two classes. It's the hello service decorator and dummy hello service. So if I run the test, it should pass, first of all. Sorry. And if you look at the console, there are no messages because we did not include the console logger and so on. So, it's testing CDI components. The next part, Vertex. Vertex is modern and popular and so on. But sometimes you might have some existing components, some legacy business logic, let's say, and our mission is to reuse this logic with modern JVM toolkit like Vertex. So what we need to do is to start the CDI container somehow and stop it. And what we will do is also that we will use Vertex web server and expose our hello service. So the next test, and it's actually the last one. This is a normal Vertex test. We're using Vertex unit runner, and if you look at the test, it's very simple. We use before and after methods, so we start a Vertex instance, then we deploy a special vertical. I will show you later. It's vertical. And then in our test method, we are using rest assured blocking API just to test that if we call or if we do an HTTP GET request, we receive the correct answer. So now quickly look at the vertical we have here. It looks complicated, but it's actually not very complicated. First of all, we need to start the weld somehow. So we use an existing component we provide again in our weld vertex extension. It's called welded vertical. We deploy this vertical, and if it succeeded, then we can be sure that the weld container is running. And the rest is actually not so interesting. We're using Vertex Web, which provides a router API. Then we again obtain our hello service, which is a bean instance. And then we register a blocking handler, because CDI is usually blocking, as most of the EE code. And we say that if the path starts with the hello, we will use our handler and actually we call our bean instance. And finally, we start the Vertex web server. So I will run the test again. So it takes a little bit longer because we are starting Vertex also, but it seems that it works. Our weld Vertex extension allows to do much more, but I just wanted to show the simplest way of integrating those two different words, like Vertex, which is asynchronous and reactive and so on, and CDI, which is perceived as a more legacy and synchronous code. And the last thing I would like to show you is a special development tool we have in Weld. So I created this main method, which actually does the same as the test. We run the vertex and deploy hello vertical. However, my run configuration also enables the development mode, and we'll see what happens. So run the application. If you look at the console, there is some warning about that. Well, development mode is enabled. That's cool. And now we will try to use or test our application manually. So I will just test it. Okay, fine. This is the console. We have unique and hello message generated. If I pass it again, it shouldn't be here. And because we have enabled the development mode, I can also inspect our default HTML client of the development tool. So let me show you. Okay, as you can see, it's running in our Vertex application, and it's this tool enables us to inspect our components at runtime, which means that we can look at at the beans deploy. So I can, for example, take a look at event host service. This is our implementation. We can see that it has a decorator associated and so on. That's the first part, and we also have some basic monitoring features. Actually, we allow to see all the fired events and bean business method invocations. So let me check the fired events. Okay, fine. We can see that because of our event is of type string, and we can see the string directly. Let me try to use some forbidden word. Okay. We can see that it was really a fired event. And the last thing, really last thing, yeah, we're out of time. This is the second thing I was talking about. It's monitoring invocations of beans. So we can see that event host service bean was involved 3 times. And if you look at the detail, we can see that some basic information about the invocation. For example, that this invocation calls an observer method to be found. So that's it. We are out of time. Thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions.
The weld problem that you just solved, that's part of Wi-Fi, or
Yeah.
you have to deploy it?
Yeah. This development tool is actually part of Wi-Fi already. What we have seen right now, it was a special Vertex version, because normally you need some, there is some REST API, and the default client just asks for data, and normally we use servlet, some kind of REST API written in servlet, and in this case there are no servlets, of course, because we are on Vertex, so there are some Vertex handlers. Yes, it's available there. Sorry, once again. How do I compare CDI and Spring? That's more like a question when discussing over beer or so, because I think it's out of the scope of this presentation, but we can discuss later.